What is up, heathens? I really enjoy you guys being here yet again to watch more of me arguing with Matt. Today, we're going to continue on discussing James, brother of the Lord. Now, I know that we kind of really harped on that a lot last time, pretty much the whole episode, but we still have a lot to go over here. We'll argue, really. And this is the part where I kind of lose my shit. Again, this entire conversation with Matt has been a learning experience for me, so don't judge me too hard. The portions where I was kind of stumped and I'm looking for information, I've since gone back and really informed myself. So just bear with me on that part, and don't just outright discount anything I say or Matt says. Listen to the arguments and you decide for yourselves. When you've made up your mind, though, I would like you to comment below with what you think about the situation about James, the brother of Christ. So please do that.
So,
sure. Even then, no one even after
still, you're disregarding the two things that I said. You're disregarding that he set up baptized Christians to be brothers in the Lord, and the fact that Christ is regularly referenced as the first of many brethren. You're totally ignoring those. You're ignoring those in order to make your narrative work.
I'm not. We talked because you mentioned Mark, so I'm not trying to ignore that. Let's get back to that. Which was written first, Galatians or Romans?
Huh? That was Romans 6:3 and Romans 8:29.
Which epistle was written first, Galatians or Romans?
I don't know.
Do you think that's important to the theology of understanding those two passages?
I think that it's important to the theology of Paul. And okay, I think that with Paul, saying that baptized Christians are brothers in the Lord, I don't think that that is something that happens later. It doesn't. I don't think that Paul just makes it up here. I think that he's letting the Romans know that is that's part of Christianity, and that would always be part of his preaching and his gospel.
So we're in Galatians. Because we can't make assumptions. We have to go use the historical method here. We're in Galatians, so you get the impression, this theological concept, that the Galatians were familiar with whatever Paul wrote in Rome.
I don't know. No.
Okay.
See, no. Listen.
You're assuming they were aware of this quote in Romans.
Okay, but you're assuming that they wouldn't know that.
No, I'm not assuming that. I'm taking the text and interpreting the text through the information we have.
You're assuming that they wouldn't know that. Then, I mean,
I can't say they would. I can't prove they would. So therefore, we should withhold judgment that they.
You can't prove Jesus existed, but you believe that he did.
No, I think it's more probable than not that Paul thought he existed. But the point being, sorry, my earpiece is falling out. The point being, what we're doing, what apologetics like to do, is taking the Bible as a whole and trying to. Oh, sorry, my earpiece fell out. We're trying to connect the pieces of the Bible as a whole, assuming that's how it was meant to be read. When Paul wrote Galatians, he did not anticipate someone to go back to Romans and interpret what was written in Romans and add that to his epistle to this church.
Yeah, but you're also, but in doing that, you're assuming that wasn't part of Paul's gospel that he preached.
No, I think Paul thought it was common, greet brothers in the Lord with a kiss. That was, but you have to take this stack of evidence here. Let's see. Does Paul ever call anyone else by name brother Lord? No, he does not. Do we have external traditions, sources of this guy being James, being brother of Jesus? Yes, we do. Do we have anywhere in Galatians where Paul specifies, when I call somebody brother, I mean it in a generic way? No, we don't. So you have to take it as a historian, and that's not saying for sure Paul meant James was the Lord, but you have to take it on probability. Using what we know, it just seems improbable that Paul meant this as a generic term, because he doesn't he's name dropping here. He gives everybody a title. He gives James a title, Cephas a title, John a title. He gives their name followed by this title he gives. So it seems peculiar to me that he would just say James, this generic guy, and then I got Peter, the chief apostle, I got John, one of the pillars, etc.
Well, okay, look. Considering that Paul considered all baptized Christians to be brothers in the Lord, don't you think it would make more sense that he would be specific in saying like brother in the flesh or something like that?
But in the context, I think if Paul knew how much people we would be debating about this, he would. It flows. You got to understand. That's what I mean about experts in the syntax.
Well,
really
why would he
care about it. Because he's calling someone in the Greek James, and then this is their title. Cephas, this is his title. In essence, why would he call one person just James, a fellow Christian? But Cephas, he's a chief apostle. John, he's a pillar of the church, etc., etc. It just seems more logical that it's a title. This character held, whoever he was, it's a title. Whether it's true or not, whether the debate shouldn't be, I think we're debating the wrong issue. And that's what a problem and I asked Carrier this once too, and he didn't comment on it yet. But I think the question should be, what did the title mean? Not whether it's a generic term for a fellow Christian, but did the title actually mean this guy was saying to be Jesus' brother, or was it a title in this early church movement? To me, and to every scholar out there, it's clearly a title given to this character. And the question I think we should be debating is, what did that title mean? Okay. Instead of whether it's a generic term or not.
Well, no, I think that the quote-unquote title here would be that he's trying to separate this James as just a regular Christian out from the other two who are a bit more prominent in it. I mean, there was kind of like a hierarchy in there of importance. And
but he lists James first.
Huh?
He lists James first, and then he talks about James's authority as the head of the church in Jerusalem. So clearly James had authority. That's the point.
Wait, okay, so now you're saying that this James in Galatians is the pillar.
Paul thinks, yes. It's the same. Paul thinks
the brother in the Lord is the pillar.
Yes.
Because the James that is the pillar is actually the brother of John, the other pillar.
Where do you get that from? Where is that anywhere in the text?
Crap. I had it. It's in the text that.
You're talking about still in Galatians, right?
Huh? Yes. I'm fairly certain that we're still in Galatians. I mean, if you're saying that James is the pillar, then I'm going to have to disagree with you, because the James that is the pillar is the brother of John, another pillar.
Let's go through the end of Galatians here, where he goes back 15 years later. I think it's in, where is that here? It's back. We're doing Bible reading today. There you go. Galatians 2 here. Okay, he goes back, talks to, in the contrary, when they saw that I had been entrusted with the gospel to the uncircumcised, just Peter himself. Yeah. And then when James and Cephas and John, who seemed to be pillars, received the grace that was given to me, they gave me the right hand of fellowship. So where does he say that's a different James?
Well, No, I'm not saying that he says that it's a different James. I think that's a good conclusion to make. What I'm saying is that James is described as the brother of John. So unless...
Where does it say the brother of John?
Crap, I'll have to look it up. Hold on.
Galatians 2. And when James and Cephas and John, who seemed to be pillars, which is an interesting thing for Paul to say, the only James Paul ever mentions, which is why some scholars doubt the historicity of James, son of Zebedee, is James, the brother of the Lord.
Well, yeah. I mean, he mentions James, the brother of the Lord. But I mean, I don't know why it's not good enough that he's setting aside that James to be one of these generic Christians out there, since James is such a well used name in that area. Like, I don't see why that's outside of any kind of useful assumption. Like you're all about making assumptions until it comes to this point.
No, we're not making assumptions. We're understanding what Paul's saying. Paul, again, he gave these people specific positions and titles. He's saying Cephas was a chief apostle to the circumcised, and John was a pillar, and James was the brother of the Lord. He's name dropping here. It's clearly what he's doing. He's trying, and this James character had authority in the church. That's the whole issue, because James.
I don't think that he did, though.
But yes, because that was the issue. Under James's authority, so if you take Galatians, or the point of Galatians, people who had James's authority went to Paul's church in Galatia and told them they should be circumcised. Paul took issue with this and went to Jerusalem to discuss this with James, who was one of the pillars. The only James in this letter is this James, the brother of the Lord. So why then should we assume all of a sudden he's talking about James, the son of Zebedee? Unless it's just, again, I'm not saying this is right or this is wrong. I'm just saying the reason scholars take a lot of issue with saying this was a generic term was just because he's calling people by titles. James, the brother of the Lord, Cephas, the chief apostle. Why then would he it makes sense.
No, I don't think that he randomly does it. I think that, you're totally disregarding my explanation here in favor of your own explanation.
I'm not disregarding your explanation. I think your explanation.
Yes, you are.
The issue with your explanation seems, I'm saying the issue with your explanation is it's not found anywhere within the text of Galatians. You have to assume. Then it also ignores the fact that James, the Lord's brother, seems to be a title, because it flows along with the other characters he meets. It seems to be a title of a position held within this early church. Because, again, he's saying, I went to meet James, the Lord's brother. He's not, and then he went to meet Cephas, the chief apostle, and John was a pillar. He's not. Where do you get...
Okay, so why can't... you were all about generic names before, but now you got a problem with it. I'm kind of curious as to why.
What do you mean I was about generic names?
Why can't there be a duplicate James in there? Like, why can't it just
be? But you have to take it within the... Yes, there could be.
No, but you're disregarding that. You're disregarding that possibility. That it could be a separate James in which he's describing a general brother in Christ or a brother in the Lord. He's setting them aside from the other two because they hold higher positions in the church.
But what's the evidence for that within the text? It's not there. That's the issue. I'm not saying I'm completely disregarding
it. It's evident in Paul's like preaching and his own gospel that he spreads, it being brother. Like calling other Christians brothers. That's part of his revelations and shit.
But let's take your argument and then say, okay, if this is true, if he called people just generic Matt, the Lord's brother, where would we should expect to find this in other texts? We don't. This is the only person he ever calls by this title that we have.
Okay,
it lacks predictability, it lacks explanatory scope.
I don't think that it does. Does he ever mention other general Christians?
Cephas, John,
No. I'm saying general
Titus,
Christians, like
Timothy.
William Mill, Joe, James, and
But James isn't a general Christian. James has authority in the church. That's what Galatians is about.
No. What I'm saying is that for my position to hold some kind of credence, he would need to reference other general Christians. So where in Paul's writings does he reference other general Christians?
How about in Romans?
Okay.
Look at the opening to Romans. How about when he says he traveled with Barnabas in Galatia? He talks about other people all the time, and he never calls anybody this title. This is why it seems to be a unique title this person held. Look at Romans 1. He gives a list of people he's writing to. He always does this. He talks about people all the time. And then he randomly talks about this character named James, who he has authority that he calls a pillar of the church that seems to have people who does his bidding, because he sends people to Galatia to tell them they should be circumcised. So this character seems to have authority within some religious community. But the point being...
That particular instance doesn't seem to have any authority at all. He's set separate from the other two.
But he categorizes them all three together.
No,
Galatians.
he doesn't. He categorizes the other two together, but he doesn't categorize the first one. He sets him apart.
James, Cephas, and John, who seem to be pillars, received the grace that was given them.
No, James. James. The
Galatians 2:9. How else would you interpret that? James, Cephas, and John. All three pillars, right there.
No, but he sets James aside by calling him a brother in the Lord. I feel like we're going around in circles.
Galatians 1, yes. Galatians 1, he says, James, a brother of the Lord. He went to see James, a brother. If this guy was just a nobody, why would he go see him and name him first? Clearly, this was a character the people of Galatia knew about, or else it wouldn't be important to name him. After 3 years up to Jerusalem, he saw no one. Except
it was important because they were the only three Christians there.
Well, you think they were the only three Christians in Jerusalem at the time?
He says that he didn't see any other Christians other than these three. So, I mean, that's why it was important. You're assuming that there were more Christians there, even though Paul doesn't say there were.
No, there were other Christians in Jerusalem at the time, but he's saying these are the three people he went to talk to, is what he's saying. And he mentions his character, James, the brother of the Lord.
What other Christian, does he mention seeing other Christians while he's there?
Well, yes. Are you saying there were only three Christians in Jerusalem?
No, I'm saying Paul said that.
Yes. Well, let's look at 1 Corinthians. He mentions he's met other people when he...
well, you know what? If I'm not allowed to jump to Romans, you're not allowed to jump to 1 Corinthians.
Well,
okay?
I'm saying, no, but you're making a general statement that there's no other Christians in Jerusalem. And I'm saying...
No. I'm saying that Paul went to Jerusalem and he only saw those three Christians.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Yes, okay. Yes, I misunderstood what you're saying. I'm sorry. I thought you were saying, actually, factually, historically, there were only three people who were Christians in Jerusalem. Sorry about that. Yes, but there's a reason he only saw these three. Why did he only see these three? Because he called them pillars, or they perceived. Paul says
actually, he didn't call James pillar. He just called him a brother in the Lord. Later on, he mentions a James.
Galatians 2, he says James, Cephas, and John perceive themselves to be pillars. Is he talking about a different James now?
Well, I don't know, but obviously, wouldn't it make more sense for him to say James as a pillar rather than brother in the Lord?
It would if that was his title, but pillar wasn't a title. Pillar was just, again, he calls them perceive. He says they perceive themselves to be pillars, almost sarcastically, I think. But no, again, if Cephas is the chief apostle to the circumcised, James is the brother of the Lord. Again, if we're saying it was a generic term, we have to use the historical method and say, okay, that's a hypothesis. When he says this, it's a generic term that he uses just generically to Christians. Okay, let's test this hypothesis. Does it have predictability power? Where, if it does, we should find him using this term elsewhere. We do not. does it have explanatory scope? Meaning, does it explain other Christians using this term? Do we have evidence of other first century Christians using this term, etc.? No, we don't. So it lacks in the historical method, I think, is why I'm hesitant to accept it. And I think a more worthy debate is, what does this title mean? Because I think a lot of scholars naturally assume it means the physical brother of Jesus, and that would explain why later traditions have Jesus' brother being James. But I think that's a more worthy debate that gets lost because we don't want to say it means what it means. I think.
Well, okay, what do you think that it means?
I don't think we have enough information to determine if it was a title given to this character. Like we have, like, sons of God or kings. That doesn't mean they're actually physical sons of God. So will brother of the Lord be a position? Like, did Jesus just appoint him to an authority position after his death? We don't have enough information to determine what it means. But I think we have enough information to know Paul didn't mean just a generic Christian. Clearly, this James bothered Paul enough to write a letter about him. And clearly, we have external sources that this James was the brother of Jesus, but their external sources post-date Galatians. So people at that time interpreted Galatians to mean a brother, not a generic figure. We just don't have any external evidence that people interpret it that way.
Okay, so you're saying there's no external evidence to validate that he was the brother of Jesus?
I don't think there's enough external evidence to validate that Jesus actually had a brother named James. I think it's probable. Sure, I don't see any issue with it, but James was a common name. People had a lot of kids back then. Jesus could have had a brother. But to say this James was the brother of the Lord, is it a title? Is it actually his brother? I think Paul, we don't have enough information.
Well, okay, well then I want to leave it at this though. How do you explain Paul, it being part of his teachings, that you call other Christians brothers in the Lord or sisters in the Lord? How do you explain that then? Like, what mental gymnastics do you have to do in order to get around that?
I think we're doing mental gymnastics to make it not, or at least not taking the letter Galatians in the entire context of what Galatians is. Again, if Paul all the time called people generic names, brother in the Lord, we need to make historical predictions about that.
Well,
we have to follow the hypothesis through. The hypothesis lacks explanatory scope. We've been through this. Prove your hypothesis that Paul called people this all the time. Show your hypothesis.
He calls James the brother of the Lord because he is a generic. God damn it, let me fucking finish.
But that's the claim. That's the hypothesis, not the evidence for the hypothesis.
No, but I give you evidence and you just disregard it. So.
What's the evidence?
The evidence is that he sets it out in Romans. He sets it out 2 times in Romans. He called, like in Mark, people are called the brothers of the Lord. I mean, it's all throughout it that other Christians, baptized Christians, are called brothers in the Lord. I don't understand why you're so hesitant to accept the fact that this is a common title among other Christians. Because not that he just calls random Christians out there, oh, you're a brother in the Lord. And that's all, like, instead of calling him, Jimmy, he calls, oh, you're brother in the Lord. Like, I don't understand that.
Well, again, we've been through Mark, and I think it's Mark, Jesus very clearly has physical brothers. But, again, we can't look at it through how we would look at it in the 21st century. How did people interpret the text during the time? There's no external evidence. People interpret it as a generic name. People clearly interpret it as one way during the time from the evidence we have. And again, if your claim is Paul called people this title just without it having an authoritarian position, we would expect him to use it elsewhere, and he doesn't. And in the context he's using it in Galatians, he's categorizing these people together with specific positions of authority. Cephas has
and he never talks about the generic Jimmy John Christian that walks on the street, does he?
Yes. How do you not? He talks about Christians all the time.
No,
James,
I'm talking specifically like a specific.
But James wasn't that. How can you say he was?
No, what I'm not saying.
Are you saying James did not have authority in the church, according to Paul?
I'm saying that James, that's described as the brother of the Lord, if he was a generic Christian, I'm saying that in order to prove that he would use that elsewhere, where else does Paul mention a generic, just run-of-the-mill, walking along the sidewalks of Jerusalem Christian? Like, where does he name another one? Like, give a specific name. He gave a specific name to this one because there were only 3 there that he saw. That's the reason why he mentioned him. So where else in Paul's writings does he specifically mention a regular run-of-the-mill Joe Christian for him to use? Just the generic brother in the Lord.
So in order for this hypothesis to be correct, and I'm just trying to weigh it out here and weigh both hypotheses here, that James had to be a nobody. And then so we have to first assume that. And then we have to assume Paul called nobodies this and didn't call people, he knew this phrase at all, because we know people Paul knew and he never called anyone that. So we have to assume several things that aren't in the text. Or we can just say, with the information we have currently, the more probable explanation is he just meant what it said. So that's my issue with that hypothesis, is we can just say with the information we have, it's more probable right now that he means what it said. But if more information comes along that, yes, he only called nobody this, and James was just a nobody, but we don't have that information, and it requires assumptions to get there.
Okay. Well, sorry for me getting a little agitated by it. Sometimes I get very, passionate, I guess, about my argumentation. So sorry about that.
I speak in churches where it can get a lot more heated. I spoke at a Baptist church about the historical Jesus. You can imagine how that went.
All right, guys. I hope that you enjoyed that. We actually changed subjects next week, so I hope that you guys will stick around for that one too. In today's episode, I really got flustered there near the end of it, and I actually picked up my notebook and I threw it on the ground at one point, which I got a stern look from KC at that point because I was losing my shit. But like I said, it was a nice learning experience, and I'm glad that Matt and I are still very good friends. We still talk. We're Facebook friends, so it's serious as fuck, right? So anyways, I hope that you guys will join us next time. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Later, heathens.